All right, I'm in the process of republishing through my press, Iconic Books, republishing my 2017 Gilgamesh novel called Gilgamesh Redux. Although this is a totally different book. The difference between this and that is the difference between a rough draft and a final draft of a work. I've not only added fantastic AI images from Google's Gemini, going all the way through it, but also I've rewritten a lot of it. I've added a new story, and there's a lot of stylistic changes, all kinds of crazy stuff. It's a completely different book now. This is the cover that is under construction. We're still working on it. Couple of things to note, though. Gilgamesh Redux squared. So squared is using algebraic notation instead of saying 2.0. It is sort of squared. Gilgamesh times itself. It is really a double deal. And this symbol here is the dingir, which is the Akkadian symbol for a god, which is a star, because they thought, the Babylonians and the Sumerians thought that the stars were gods. And whenever the name of Gilgamesh is written, it's always written with that dingir, because he was deified, even though he was a historical individual who lived 2600 BC or so in the ancient Sumerian city of Uruk. He was deified and was generally regarded as the god of the dead, and the first human being to be actually transformed into a god. So that's the tradition. That's why I've got the dingir. And of course the lion is his signature, just as it is Hercules. So we definitely wanted an image of him hunting or slaying a lion on the cover. The AI won't allow you to portray any kind of cruelty to animals. It doesn't understand a couple of things. It doesn't understand context, number one, and it doesn't understand metaphors and symbols. If you enter into a paragraph of writing where you have the use of the words like or as though, it'll literalize those. In one case, it was a happy accident, which I'll get to, regarding my version of Noah's Ark, Utnapishtim's Ark. So you got to have him in association with the lion, because he's essentially, when he kills the lion, it is the constellation Leo. And there are no doubts about it. This book is based on the zodiac and the planets. Gilgamesh's father is the planet Mercury, which moves the fastest, and that's why Lugobanda has the powers to run faster than anyone, like the DC comic book character Flash. Same thing. Gilgamesh himself is the sun. And the lion that he kills is not only the constellation Leo, but it's associated with Inanna. Inanna is the lion goddess, so he's appropriating her powerful symbol, which is, the lion is associated with the sun anyway, and she's associated with the planet Venus, not necessarily the sun. But she is an echo of a very early Neolithic tradition of having goddesses associated with cats, lions, and leopards, and so forth, all the way back to Çatalhöyük at least. 6500 BC or so, there's a woman, a fat mother goddess, sitting in between two leopards. Okay, so that's the what we're doing with the cover. The Amazon KDP will actually slice off all of this blue, and except for the blue on the bottom, but I want it there because it links to the sky, which is, he's 2/3 God and 1/3 man, and they regarded the sky as divine, and the rest of it up here is associated with the earth. It's all earth browns, earth tones, and so forth. So 2/3 God, 1/3 man. Here it's 2/3 man, 1/3 God, with the sky down here. So this is the thing. The images in this book are not just mere decorations, and they're not just illustrations, because I've put a lot of thought into each one of these images. And they're woven carefully into the text, as well as linked together with each other. The images will comment back on previous images and forward on others. So you have to pay careful attention to what I've done with each of the images as you read through this. All right, so what I want to do is just read one of the chapters to you, but also do a quick flyby so you can see the whole text and what you would be in for if you decided to purchase it. It'll be available on Amazon in just a few days. We're finishing up. I'm on the last bit of proofreading and fixing the numbers and table of contents and so forth. All right, so this is the title page, and I've included the Akkadian spellings. There have been several versions of his name. This is the Akkadian spelling of his name, together with the dingir determinative, the star. So this is the Gilgamesh, his name written in Akkadian. In Sumerian, it might have been the earlier form of Pa-Bil-Gamesh. We know that the Sumerians pronounced it Bilgamesh, but Pabil suggests a reference to Pabilsag, who is the Sagittarius. And humans being how they are universally lazy, they like to contract things, so they probably dropped the Pa very early on and just said Bilgamesh. And then this one too, Jishjinmesh. These are Akkadian spellings. And then this is the word, Tuarim is the word for to return in Akkadian. Okay. So here we go. Gilgamesh Redux Squared, a novel. And this is the Asaku demon over here. This is the demon that is associated with sickness and illness. If someone gets sick, they normally assumed that you were being possessed by a demon. And Enkidu at one point will be possessed by a demon. So then we're just, and the table of contents is the tablet of contents, since they wrote on clay tablets. And this is a lion man centaur who looks as though he were holding up the tablet in presenting it. I still have to put in the page numbers. All right, I want to do a quick flyby. I already did one video on the tale of the courtship of Lugubanda and Lady Ninsamuna. And this is his grandfather, Enmerkar. So we start with the grandfather. And he is the grandson of the sun god Shamash in Babylonian, or Utu in Sumerian. I retained Shamash since this text was written in the time of, by some genius whose name we do not know. It might be Shashank, in the time of Hammurabi, about 1790 BC. He's a genius. He was the first to see that the various random Gilgamesh stories that were written in Sumerian were floating around out there could be strung together like pearls on a necklace using the zodiac as the road that Gilgamesh's adventures fall on. Academics have a hard time buying that, but it doesn't matter, it's correct, and the academics are simply wrong, as they usually are. Okay, the Tale of Emberkar, so this is the city here as it's just getting up and running. And I've used the Babylonian notation. No Arabic numerals in this book at all, none whatsoever. It's all Babylonian numbers. That's the symbol for the number 1, which my guess is that it's probably a stylized human head with a neck. And then so this is the tale of Enmerkar and how he invents writing. And I've retained the essence of the story, just translated it into my own writing style. And then we have the tale of Lugubanda, and this is the symbol for Lugal, which means the great king of a city is a Lugal. And then he gets left behind in a cave. He becomes the prototype for Lazarus, and also for Philoctetes, as I mentioned in a previous video. Some of these AI images are just incredible. I mean, I was astonished when it produced this. I like the sort of graphic novel, comic booky style of this particular image. And there is Lugubanda. He is most definitely Mercury. There's no two ways about that. He is the planet Mercury. And then this is Inanna. She is the planet Venus, the goddess of sex, love, war, etc. That's her lion, a female lion. Gilgamesh has a male lion, note that. And then I read this, I did a previous video. Here they're building the Eanna temple that's sacred to Inanna. She's the primary goddess of the city, just as her father An, or Babylonian Anu, is the primary god. So I reconstructed and did my own riff on the tale of the courtship of Lugubanda and Lady Ninsamuna, and that's her name there in Akkadian. And these are the high-resed, and in some cases we've cranked up the color on some of these images and super saturated them. Because there's always a loss when you print a book, there's always a resolution loss and a slight downgrading of the color. And this is all about the conception of Gilgamesh here in this story, and then how Lugubanda got to the throne, which was by way of the cow goddess Lady Ninsamuna, who starts as a rube and then ends up assassinating her way to the throne. And there she is getting ready for an erotic encounter with Dumutzi, who is the brother of Lugubanda and the current En, which is the high priest king ruler who's on the throne. Okay, so I added that story, and then I did a lot of rewriting all the way through this. Here, now Gilgamesh is famous for building the walls of Uruk, not the temple. The temple itself belongs to Inanna. It's her city. but the walls that he built under his reign belonged to him, and they were to protect against floods, not just against enemies, but both, basically. And so I've retained the short Gilgamesh story, the Sumerian story of the battle against Akka, which is how he got onto the throne as Lugal by winning this war. And then we have Tablet 1, Ecce Homo, Behold the City at Dawn, wire sticks of date palms, parallel rows and segmented vertebrate axes, fantails splayed in dark array against the agate sky, the cubes of its rotting, plastered tan houses, cored out centers for courtyards, rhomboid, trapezoid, three-story mud brick buildings with tips of logs puncturing their epidermal membranes. And of course, there's no punctuation because there was no punctuation. Punctuation was an invention of the Middle Ages, as well as capital letters and all of that. Behold its walls, archaic baked bricks as old as Jericho, slathered in bitumen as the warm pink sun of dawn crawls over their surfaces in an archaic flood of prehistoric light. Behold the man who walks upon its walls with a beard like Sargon's, hair tied back in a bun, bare-chested, garbed in a lambskin kilt, lapis bracelets on his right wrist, and a necklace of carnelian beads on his chest. And this over here is the symbol for to build something. And there he is. That's his first appearance in the story on the walls at dawn. It will also be the last time we see him. He will be on the walls of the city, only it'll be twilight, not dawn. And then so the opening tablets tell of Enkidu, and this is Enkidu, who is a wild man who has crashed down to the earth in a meteorite, but he represents the nomad, the rube, the pre-cultural phase of a civilization when the cultures are just wandering nomadic bands, not yet civilized. And whereas Gilgamesh fights a lion and takes its pelt, and the lion is a daytime symbol for the sun, the leopard is the symbol for the stars, and Black Panthers do indeed have they do indeed have spots when the sunlight shines. You can barely make them out there. He represents the nighttime sky, and he kills a Black Panther and steals its skin. He also kills wolves as well. This is a scene where he has killed a wolf. This is an AI image, and I gave it an exact description of what I wanted, but I didn't tell it to do it in the style of Frank Frazetta or Boris Vallejo, and it did a perfect imitation. Frank Frazetta could not have done any better if I had commissioned him to paint Enkidu wearing a wolf skull, because the wolf, the dog, is always associated with the underworld, and Enkidu is the one who dies. The two of them together represent the constellation of Gemini. They are the Gemini. One dies, one survives. That later becomes Castor and Pollux. So Tablet 2 is out of the wild, tells the story of moving now into migrating toward the city. We're moving from the pre-culture phase to the springtime phase in the Spenglerian morphology. And they want to make themselves famous, so they want to go out to slay the monster guarding the cedar forest, Humbaba. So they retain a blacksmith here to hammer 2 bronze axes and 2 swords for them. And this is Tablet 3, his mother, but she's aged now. This is like 20 years later, Lady Ninsamuna. And this is her temple. She's the cow goddess, so she's got the bulls out front there. And it's a crumbling old temple that's in bad disrepair. It's as though her cult were fading away. People were forgetting it. But this is now, the whole middle of the book is all about the civilization phase. Here is a fantastic AI image. I fed it a very specific paragraph out of my text, making sure there were no metaphors in there for it to mess up. And it produced a perfect image of Gilgamesh and Enkidu on their way north as they go along the Euphrates River, which eventually takes them to the cedar forest all the way in the uplands of the north, going through Syria and up into Palestine. Absolutely amazing. So this is Tablet 4, the journey to the cedar forest. And here they are. This town is still there. It is one of the oldest towns still in existence. It's at least 5,000 or 6,000 years old. It's spelled H-I-T, and it's pronounced in Arabic heat. But back then it was known as Id, I-D. And it was a town famous for, it was very sooty and gritty because it produced bitumen. And bitumen was the super glue of the time. That's what they used to hold the planks together on their boats and hold anything together. You needed bitumen. And here they are just leaving the town. And here they are crossing over. And these are all details that I've taken from a travel diary. of a couple who traveled this exact same route. So all the details are very concrete and realistic. Here they are again, slowly moving into the uplands. And over here they're passing a group of Martu who are encamped, and they are the nomads. They're Semites who will later become the Babylonians, who will then take over ancient Sumer and inherit its language of Akkadian, and then produce the Gilgamesh epic by some genius, Shashank or whoever he was. So that's the reference there. So you have to think about what you're looking at. And then they're going up. There's an extinct volcano back there, which is real, covered with blue irises. Iris is the messenger goddess. Keep that in mind as they're traveling up into the uplands here. And I've put in some old ruins. Some of these are things I made up. These ruins, like this one here, the ruins of the ancient town of Kebnuna, which was a real place. But it's sort of like a Lord of the Rings moment when they're marveling at it. And now they're going into the uplands, walking along here with their donkeys. And even further, I saturated these images so that the color is cranked up quite a bit. But when it prints, it's going to lose a little bit of it. Not that much, but it will lose some of this. And here they are. They've made it all the way to the ocean. You can just barely make out the ocean up there. And now it's time to descend into the cedar forest to kill its spirit so that they can create new pathways for deforestation, basically, to take place. They'll send the logs down the Euphrates to build things like palaces and thrones and all that kind of stuff. So here we are with Tablet 5, the killing of Humbaba. They look pretty badass. They're like a couple of characters out of Lord of the Rings. And then here's Humbaba, how I've imagined him, as a demon creature floating in the air with tusks. Give it a kind of Brothers Hildebrandt kind of lighting for those of you who know your fantasy art, swords and sorcery fantasy art. That's a nod to the Brothers Hildebrandt there. Okay, and then this is them killing him. And it took forever to get the AI to spit this image out correctly. I kept having to tell it, no, I want Gilgamesh on the left side over here, but it's the monster's right side, and Gilgamesh is right-handed. He represents the right, the path of life. Enkidu represents the left side, the path of death. So he has a bronze axe. Those axes were linked with the crescent moon, which dies and revives. And he's on the left. He represents the left-hand path, the monster on the left. And it kept putting them in different positions and not understanding what I want. It must have taken about 20 iterations, at least 20, for me to get this image, which I wanted that corresponds with the ancient Babylonian image of him, which I've included here, where one of them is on the left and the one on our right has the axe, but it's the monster's left. And then this is the spectacular image of them felling the cosmic axis, the pole star, the cedar tree. That's exactly what it is. It's the pole star. And this later becomes, it echoes into Jewish mythology where Gilgamesh becomes Samson, who knocks down two pillars of the temple instead of a single cosmic axial tree, which is the normal tradition. James Cameron has a nod to this in his film Avatar when they pull down the cosmic sacred tree there. This is a spectacular image. I couldn't even believe that the AI produced an image of this quality. And with them here again in the same positions as when they were killing Humbaba. And then here we are with Tablet 6, Taurus. And most scholars do agree that it is the constellation Taurus. Why they can agree on that, but not on the other constellations being in the narrative, is beyond me. It's academic stupidity. And here he is cleaning his weapons. And then it's retained the continuity in almost the same style when Inanna shows up with her retinue of worshippers. And she comes on to him and wants to marry him. And he says, nothing like that's going to happen. I know what you did to Dumuzi, my uncle. I know how you possessed my mother, the lady Ninsamuna. And so I'm not going to play that role of the dying and reviving god, the Dumuzi, Osiris type of god who dies and revives, and all the power comes from the woman. The Babylonians, they weren't that great on women. You have to remember, these were tough men who came in out of the nomadic steppes. And very rough way of life. Women they're regarded more or less as property by such nomads. And when the Babylonians come in and take over Sumerian civilization, they demote the goddess. Now, there is a story, a Sumerian story, that features this scene in it. But it occurs by 2600 BC, when Gilgamesh was actually historically ruling the city of Uruk. You have to keep in mind that civilization had already been up for 1,000 years, 35 or 3600. So it was already very, very old by that time. And here she is. When he rejects her, she goes up to her father, the sky god An, or Anu, and demands the bull of heaven to send it down to the city to destroy the walls of Gilgamesh that Gilgamesh built, not the city itself, it's the walls. And then she does so, and here this is astonishing because the AI created an image that was exactly how I visualized this scene taking place, with the bull the size of a Godzilla coming in like this. It's Taurus, it has to be giant. Gilgamesh is not worried. He and Enkidu live for this kind of thing. And here they are taking it down. And again, I've carefully placed them in the same exact positions that they were in when they were killing Humbaba. And then once the bull crashes into the wall here, note what I've done to the paragraphs. The paragraphs now disintegrate. Up to this point in the narrative, it's been the dominance of the masculine rectangular style, the tablet. It's meant to represent the tablet, but it's rectilinear architecture is male. It's masculine. When you go back to the pre-pottery Neolithic A, which takes place from about 10,000 to about 8,000 BC, all the architecture is round. They live in round houses. Female geometry predominates until you get to the pre-pottery Neolithic B, about 8,000 BC, and they start making their houses in rectangular shapes because the intellect is slowly coming in and is associated with the masculine. But from henceforth, since the goddess is having her revenge for being spurned by them, rectangular, the linear style will not return until the very end. Okay, so then it disintegrates, and they flip her the middle finger. Keep in mind here with this image that Venus rules Taurus, and so she's standing on the bull, the animal that she rules. The middle finger is associated with the planet Saturn, which is the planet of death, which is what Enkidu is associated with. And he has the phallic sword thrust up at her as well. And then so, because they've reclaimed some of their power, the paragraphs temporarily are written again in block style. I didn't do any of this, and these kinds of stylistic things in the 2017 version of this. This is all new. And here they are, having fun. The very last time that the two will be happy together. They're making fun of the goddess and ridiculing her bull that they made short work of. But then this is the chapter I want to read. And so it ends here. But in the middle of the night, Enkidu awoke from a dream, and he shoved Gilgamesh to try and awaken him. And Gilgamesh woke up, though groggy, and he could barely comprehend what Enkidu was saying. But what he said was, "My friend, why have the gods gathered together in council?" And they have indeed gathered together in council because they decide that of the two, one of them must go, must pay for their crimes, deforesting, killing the guardian who was put there specifically by the high god, the highest of all the gods, Enlil, who later becomes El, who later becomes one of the names for Yahweh. And so the style, the non-rectilinear style has returned here. And this is tablet 7. And so I put the Asaku demon here, back here on the wall, as though it were a graffiti, because they brought in an exorcist, which is standard procedure when you got sick, especially with a fever. And Enkidu has been stricken by Inanna, probably using some form of black magic, to kill him. And then it's a blood moon. That means an eclipsed moon that they've chosen specifically, this exorcist Lusagata, who's a character I made up. Note that Enkidu is riding on the back of a bull. Just like there's images of Osiris riding on the back of a bull as it carries him to the underworld. So every single detail has been carefully thought out here, even to the two pillars, which later become the two pillars in both the tarot and also in Kabbalah, the severity of the right hand and the mercy of the left. Okay, let's go ahead and read this, because this is me riffing on the text because it's not. There is a tradition, there is a Sumerian story that has Enkidu journeying down into the underworld and coming back to tell Gilgamesh a little bit about it, but it's not very imaginative and it's very short. So I've just sort of taken that and run with it. Before his actual physical death, he has a dream journey through the underworld of what he's about to experience when he gets there, when his astral body separates from his physical body and gets there. The visions of Enkidu. And so it was that Anu and Enlil and Enki and Shamash met together, and Anu decreed that a debt must be paid, and that the killing of Humbaba and the bull of heaven required blood, and that one of the two must die. And Enlil nominated Enkidu, to the consternation of Shamash, who accused him of manipulating them into their deeds, and Enlil then accused Shamash of playing favorites. But the decree of Enlil had been decided, and it was ratified by Anu, and the matter was settled. And now 7 days later, here it was. Enkidu, liquefying, skin soft, waxen with pustules, eyes rotten yellow pieces of fruit, bones inside of his skin brittle and cracking as he turned over in bed. The exorcist Lusagata, meanwhile, had drawn a circle of black flour around his bed. That was a standard procedure for exorcisms, and was presently holding a tamarisk branch in his left hand, also part of the procedure, and pronouncing a liturgy of demonic expulsion. The illness, he said, that has cocooned this man has come from the netherworld. Lusagata then produced a silver cup and a gubu cup full of sacred water, which he sprinkled to invoke the aid of the goddess Ninhursag. And this is a real invocation that I took out of one of the academic books. A demon has taken hold and now hangs him upside down. His body is possessed by a saku. His arms and legs are paralyzed, chest worn and ragged with coughing. His mouth is full of phlegm. Behold the man, dumb, cast down, and prostrate. Remember when we first encountered Gilgamesh, it was Ecce Homo there. Now it's behold the other man who's going to die. He sprinkled some flour upon Enkidu's body and continued, Asalui, you have seen Enkidu in this wretched state, and you have gone to your father Enki and said to him, I do not know what this man could have done to be thus afflicted, but you, father, know everything. So tell me how I may heal him. May the divine goddess Gula, who is able to restore the dying to life, make him whole again by the touch of her hand? And you, Asalui, utter the formula that will free him from bondage. Lusagata put a necklace of stones around Enkidu's neck, lapis lazuli, gold, serpentine, breccia. The necklace will protect him from wandering spirits who have been cast out of the netherworld. Gilgamesh nodded, and the exorcist finished and then left. Gilgamesh found himself alone in the small quiet room, alone with the sound of his dying friend's labored breathing, sitting on the baked brick floor beside his matted, rumpled, sweat-soaked bed. 2 clay lamps burning sesame oil cast enormous, jittering pools of nervous orange light upon the ceiling, and outside the full moon, which the exorcist had chosen for his rite, was incandescent through the window, burning red and furious, a blood moon, portending some terrible kind of eclipse. My friend, Enkidu said, it is already too late for all of this. I dreamed last night that I was standing before the great Anzu bird, and that he was roaring at me and flapping his wings, and as his great clawed bat-like wings feathered the air, the wind that they stirred carried dead human souls that it let loose into the heavens, and I was blown backwards and found myself falling endlessly into an ancient blue darkness with mottled green cliffs bearing cerulet yellow edges in a darkness that was so deep and fathomless that no knight could ever touch it or come near it. And here I've inserted a couple of monsters. There's the centaur from the opening, but this is also the famous demon Pazuzu, made famous by the movie The Exorcist. He actually was not a demon. He was a protectress of women in childbirth. And his job was to keep away the demon woman who would steal. That's how they would explain a stillbirth or a miscarriage. And so it was Pazuzu's job to scare her away. And then I was traveling down a road through a gray, narrow canyon and came to the vast bronze green gate of Gonzir, where a man with 2 faces, who was holding a torch that kept back a small circle of the ancient darkness, took away all my clothes, and then shoved open the gate, and I followed him through it into a black chasm, where creatures of all kinds, some with long tails, some with lion's paws, and some with scaly green lizard legs, scattered in all directions, fleeing from the light of the torch as it approached them, burning a small gold coin in a vast gray-blue-purple darkness. And the man with 2 faces led me down into a canyon where there was no light anywhere, save from his torch, but I could see an enormous black tree with bare, naked, knife-like branches cut out from the gloom, and upon this tree I could make out figures, birds hopping from one branch to the next, and they had human heads on them, with empty, white, staring eyes that didn't have pupils, my friend. And the worst part of it was that they kept trying to speak out words as if they were choking, but they couldn't get the words out because they couldn't remember who they were, my friend. And here's the AI equivalent of what I've just described. Ganzir, which is the name for the gate to the underworld, variously referred to as Irshetu or Irkala or Kur, K-U-R. They have various names for the underworld. And here's all the monsters. And the double-faced Janus character is sort of a door threshold guardian there, lighting the way. And we kept walking along the narrow dirt road that led us further and further downward. And there was another canyon up ahead. And we came to the rim and looked out into a wilderness, a barren, rocky waste. And I could see lion centaurs, men with the bodies of lions, and they were human from the waist up. And they were crawling around picking up stones and boulders and making huge megalithic piles out of them, as though they were trying to build ancient Stone Age monuments. But on the other side of the piles, there were bullmen centaurs who were taking the stones away, so that as the pile grew, it shrank at the same time, and it seemed that the labors of the lion centaurs were being wasted. So that's the image of futility, which is what the underworld is, like Sisyphus with the stone rolling down on him, or Tantalus with the grapes that are forever taken away from him, but he still keeps reaching for them. Hell is the place of people stuck in behavioral patterns that they can't get out of. They're condemned to repeat the same karmic activities lifetime after lifetime. And then this is a Kusharaku bullman, minotaur. And then there's this beautiful image. And then we came to another vast ebony plain with very little light. It seemed that the only light came from glowing rocks, like volcanic magmatic rocks that were cooling off, and yet still glowing inside with their internal red-orange heat. And on this plain were scattered human figures, but they weren't doing anything. They were just sitting there with their knees drawn up, each person by himself, scattered across the plain. And then there came the sound of a wailing as of a dirge and a wash of bright yellow light, and I looked up to see the sun god come burning his way through. And as he passed by us overhead with gold radiance, the people came to life and began each one to walk in a little circle until the sun was gone and disappeared into the purple darkness as a tiny dim point. And then all the people sat down again and made no movements at all. They only lived for that little bit of light that Shamash gave them at the end of each of his days. So the idea in Sumerian and Babylonian cosmology is that when it is daytime up here in the world of the living, it's nighttime down below, and vice versa. And here is the astral version, the dead version of Humbaba. And the man with two faces kept going, and in the light of his torch I beheld a crowd of people walking in a single huge circle around a broken, jagged stone. And one of them saw me and came over to me and said that he was Itana, and he told me of his journey on the back of an eagle to the heavens, and I marveled at his tale. And then he disappeared back into the crowd, and another man came over to me and said that he was Adapa, the first man, the one who had been offered by Anu the food of immortal life, but he had been warned by Enki not to take it or he would die, and so he missed his chance at immortality, and brought death to all men in the world. And then he too disappeared with all the walking people. And then another man came over to me, and he said that he was your father Lugobanda, and he said to tell you that the missing jawbone from his skull is in the constellation of the Hyades. Those are stars that are part of the jawbone of the Taurus constellation. So it's a reference. He also slays a bull in one of his tales. And then he disappeared back into the swirling crowd, and we continued walking, and suddenly I beheld the form of Humbaba, with burning, amber-livid eyes and long tusks, now guardian of an iridescent, glowing, burning tree. And he said to me, "If you don't want to be down here, Enkidu, then you and Gilgamesh should not have killed me. You made a big mistake, and now men will tear down all the trees of my forest, just to make thrones and beds and tables and chairs, and the forest will die out, and there will be no one to replace or protect another one should it ever exist." And then he disappeared into the ink-blue gloom. Then I beheld an Asaku demon step from out of the darkness into our path, a fiery red lion demon with wings that glowed from within, and it looked at me with dark burning eyes that were like two pieces of magma taken from the depths of the earth and placed into its skull. And it was terrifying to behold, my friend. This is Saku demon, the demon of illness, death, and suffering, that I knew had me in its grip as I was sleeping, dreaming this dream. And then it continued walking on its way, and I watched as it disappeared, a flaming red walking skeletal brazier into the charcoal depths of Irkala. And then I beheld yet another demon, a man who had enslaved a Mashishu serpent, a giant creature with 7 serpent heads that walked on all fours, and a man was riding its back as though it were a horse, and he kept whipping it as the blue glowing creature went past us in the night. And I wondered what monstrosity Irkala would produce next, for the Mashishu serpent is a plague demon who destroys entire cities, and I wondered where he might be headed, what city it might be planning to destroy. And that's a real creature of, all these are real creatures from the Sumerian and Babylonian bestiary, you might say. And here we have Ereshkigal and her assistant Geshtanana, her official scribe in the underworld. And then we were moving again, and the road went down into a steep ravine that led to a large bowl-shaped depression of red glowing rocks, where the throne of Ereshkigal was. And I saw her, my friend. She was beautiful to behold, wearing a scarlet dress, and her scribe Geshtanana sat by her side with a green clay tablet, and she was reading a list of names from it. But when she saw me, she looked up and said, "Who is this man? Who brings him here? And what is his name?" And I was about to speak, to tell her what my name was, but I couldn't remember it, Gilgamesh. I couldn't even remember my name. And I began to realize it was just the beginning of the ending, the process of forgetting, that it would begin with the forgetting of the name, and then the walking in circles with all the other dead, rehearsing the deeds that brought you to Ganzir, and then the slow transformation, the growing of feathers, and the building of piles of stones to keep you occupied, and then the state of torpor, where the only pleasure you would ever have was the brief moment of the sun god's passage of light, and eventually to become one of the birds with human heads hopping from tree to tree, who could no longer remember who they ever had been, or who they had ever known. And that was the vision that Enkidu unfolded to his friend Gilgamesh as he lay dying upon his deathbed. And after recounting it, Gilgamesh said, "My friend, you saw a vision that will never be equaled." And the slight trace of faded smile momentarily ghosted across Enkidu's face as he said, "My friend, promise me you will never forget me." And he grabbed Gilgamesh with one hand, and then the hand went limp as he expired and left Gilgamesh alone in the small hot room. And Gilgamesh beseeched his friend not to leave him, but it was too late. His friend had gone and was falling down, sinking like a stone in water to the depths of Irkala, where he would land on the long road, and the man with 2 faces would greet him at the gateway to the netherworld, and take his clothes from him, and raise the torch as he opened the bronze-green gate upon the black enormous chasm. And he went to the tree of the human-headed birds, and then the lion and bull centaurs, and then the plain of the unmoving ones, and those walking in circles. And finally he would come to the throne of Ereshkigal, and her scribe Geshtanana would ask him his name, and he would be just about to say what it was, and then he would forget it. All right, so that's all I'm going to read here. This is the funeral here, funeral procession. The next tablet, Tablet 8, Lamentations, which takes place, traditionally funerals would take place over 3 days. They make a statue. Here's a statue of Enkidu. And then they put things into the pit along with him. And these are objects, real objects that I've taken from the Sumerian death list of Ur-Nammu, who was a real great sort of Sumerian master builder, kind of like Ramses the Great. Built the biggest, largest ziggurats that have ever survived. In fact, most of what has survived is ziggurats that were his doing. But these are the actual objects that they put into his tomb, not just because they think he's going to need them, but he's going to need them as bribes. You have to give to the 7 gods that you encounter one by one, you have to give them a bribe so that you will get a good place in the underworld. So I've created sort of a series here of, these are all AI produced, and they're not exactly Sumerian, they're more Sumerian-ish, but they're Sumerian-ish enough to pass. And here's the death pit that they put him in, which traditionally in one of the Sumerian Gilgamesh stories, that describes the funeral. They put it under the Euphrates, actually. And now here he is as the Wanderer, the prototype, let's say, of Mad Max. Here he is. At this point, he's already killed the lion and taken its skin, but then we experience a flashback. It looks pretty cool. And these marsh dwellers are, to this day, still in southern Iraq, and they still live this way. Still the same architecture that was used 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, and the same practices, living in marshes. And so this is his journey south. We've already had him and Enkidu journeying north to the cedar forest, and now he's journeying south to the island of Bahrain, that back then was called Dilmun. And here he is inside one of the huts. And all these details are taken from real travel journey accounts of staying with Arabs in these areas. And then here he is with the flashback where he hunts the lion, kills it. That's the book's cover, and then takes its skin. That's him not only identifying himself with the sun, but also stealing the lion, you might say, from Inanna. Remember, she had a female lion. And here are the scorpion men. They represent the constellation of Scorpio. That's pretty obvious. And this is the Garden of Stones, from whence all precious stones come. Gilgamesh has a glimpse of it. Tablet 10 is then the journey to Dilmun. And this is a city that's at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. And here they are. This is the boatman Ur-Shanabi. And that's what a real Sumerian Magur would look like. And I know that because I read a book about Thor Heyerdahl, who constructed an actual Sumerian Magur, which is to say a reed boat, to see if he could sail it from southern Iraq all the way down to Bahrain. And he did it, proving that it could be done, and was done on a regular basis. Here now, this is the beginnings of their journey as they're leaving from the mouth of the Persian Gulf. And I've sort of put the text for the first time, as far as I know anywhere, on the inside of an image, breaking it into a top and a bottom, so we experience the journey from within, as though we were one of them. And here they momentarily get stuck. This is a real detail from Thor Heyerdahl's book. And here's a sort of Gilgamesh in the mode of Apocalypse Now, you might say. Pretty spectacular image. And then there they both are. Gilgamesh looking perfectly determined and severe. Note that he doesn't have any gray hair yet. He will. And then they approach. This is based on a real island, but this is a fantasial version of it, because it's a flat island. Agarum. It's a flat island. And then here are the snakes, which is, of course, a foreshadowing of the snake that comes up and steals his plant of immortality, which I believe is actually a pearl, not a plant. And here we are inside of a storm as they're on their way to, and here they are pulling up to the island of Dilmun / Bahrain, which does look more or less like this, with a central mountain. And I've added an abandoned fortress because this is where Utnapishtim lives, and this is where Ur-Shanabi, who corresponds to Charon in Greek mythology, takes all the coffins of the dead. He ferries them to this island, which was apparently a kind of necropolis. It was the place where most people wanted to be buried, and especially those who could afford it, because it was regarded as the source, since it's unique. It's an island unique in the Persian Gulf in that it has freshwater springs around it that bubble up from below. And so they thought that that was the source of the Apsu, that Enki is the god of the mind who rules over the Apsu. You could get closer to his world if you could be buried there. But I've eliminated all people. It's abandoned, except for Utnapishtim, who is the Noah figure, and he, of course, is Aquarius. Pretty obvious. And here they are riding donkeys. Note that Gilgamesh is now growing gray. So the journey is rapidly aging him, faster than it should, with all the stress it's putting on him. And here's the cube-shaped, and that's important, cube-shaped house, because the cube corresponds. It says in the text, in the text that, and I've always puzzled over this, that Utnapishtim built the ark for the flood in the shape of a cube. I thought, why would anyone build a boat in the shape of a cube, until I realized that he is Aquarius, and when you look at their constellations, there's a square there called, they called it 1 iku, or 1 acre, but it's a square shape that's near Pegasus, and that's why. That explains the cube. Everything lines up once you figure out the right theory. Academics are lost on this. This is not just a text about a man who wants to become immortal, realizes that all men are doomed to mortality, and then just gives up. That's only one of many things that the story is about. The story is about the tale of the first man who, because he was initiated through the 12 signs of the zodiac and walked where no man had walked before, was then eligible to become the Lord of the Dead in the underworld. And there is a Sumerian text that shows them awarding him that office. And I've added that onto this as an appendix. It really is tablet 12 in there. I don't know why there are not 12 tablets. That part doesn't make much sense. Usually scholars will append the story of Enkidu's descent into the underworld as the 12th tablet, but it really isn't. But there should be 12. So here it is, and that's that tablet is tablet 11, and that is the Akkadian word for the Great Flood. So this is all the images of the Great Flood, and this is early cosmology here. This is how the Babylonians thought that the earth looked like, and it had all these portals that the Great Flood then is sent by the gods, especially by Enlil. It comes up. I really wanted the penultimate chapter to be the climax of the book, and I think we did it. Here is my version of Utnapishtim living in that cube-shaped hut, telling Gilgamesh the story about the flood. And the Babylonian author specifically, there's a separate version of it called the Atrahasis, which is another name for Utnapishtim. Zayasudra, Atrahasis, Utnapishtim, and eventually Noah. Lots of iterations. And so then he tells them that about the flood, the gods have warned him that they're going to wipe out humans, everyone except him and his family, which the tradition has as him and his wife, but I've added a second wife for cosmological reasons. He has 2 wives. And then here it comes. And the craftsman came to help me build a giant wood and mud effigy rubble heap. Now, I was describing the ark here at this point in the shape of a cube is what I was going to have it. And the AI literally interpreted it as a giant. And so this is the image that it spat out as a giant. And I thought, you dimwit. I was talking about a boat, and then I started looking at it, and I thought, that's got to be the most original Noah's Ark anyone's ever come up with, ever. Yeah, I'm gonna use it. Yeah, put it in. We'll make it a 2-page spread. Take the reader by surprise. So him and his 2 wives. They're gonna use magic or whatever it is they use to get it to get up and walk. And then the flood comes. This is probably my favorite image in the whole book. It looks amazing. Michael Whelan, the sci-fi fantasy illustrator, could not have done a better job. And he was pretty much the best of all the sci-fi cover artists from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And this style actually resembles his style quite a bit. He could not have done a better job. And then there's the flood that decimates everything. Yeah, I think this chapter really is the climax of the whole story. It's pretty spectacular special effects. And then him recounting it. And then here's the giant, after the flood is beginning to recede and they're looking for land, his 2 wives, one a blonde, that is to say the sun, one a brunette, that is to say the night. And coming out of the giant and sending 2 birds out, a raven and a dove. And they also send out a swallow, and there's a constellation near Aquarius in Mesopotamian cosmology of the swallow's tail, which is the reason why he's sending these out. And here's them on the inside of the giant's mouth, looking out as the ocean begins to recede, and new land is coming into being. Pretty spectacular stuff. This is the goddess Belit Eli. She's the goddess of birth and birth giving and creation. And in the text, it says that she gives to Utnapishtim and his family a necklace made out of lapis lazuli flies. I'm pretty sure that's the prototype for the rainbow that signifies the covenant that God sends after the flood, signifying that he will never do it again. He will never create. It's not the ever-repeating cosmic cycles paradigm. It's the once-only single-shot paradigm of the Magian civilization. And then I have him carrying Utnapishtim on his back. That's a reference to the Sinbad stories when he comes to the island where he has an old man that he has to carry on his back. And here he carries him to a real thing, which is where all the dead are buried on the island of Bahrain. And it's an ocean of mounds that looks just like this, actually. You can look this up on Google image search. And then so he tells him, I can't help you with your mortality, but I can tell you where you can find a plant of immortality, and you can take that and it will at least bring back your youth. Sort of hit the reset button. I'm pretty sure it's not a plant, though. Somebody's mistranslating somewhere, because this is an archetypal image of in Chinese mythology, this is the dragon with the sun in its mouth. In Grimm's fairy tales, which is the first of the fairy tales, this is the frog that comes up out of the well bearing the red ball in its mouth that it gives to the girl. And Geoffrey Bibby, I read his book, Looking for Dillman, who was an archaeologist who did all kinds of excavations, I think in the 60s or 70s. And he says he did indeed find a pottery jar with the skeleton of a snake curled up in it, and it had a pearl in its mouth. And to this day, the pearl divers off Bahrain dive the same way Gilgamesh does. Put a clothespin on their noses, tie a rope to their legs, with a little wicker basket, dive down. So I'm pretty sure it's a pearl. It's not a plant. But anyhow, the snake eats it, and that's why it sheds its skin. It's a symbol of immortality. So he has to return back to the city, and how I have added the 12th tablet as an epilogue, where he becomes the Lord of Irkalla, the judge of the dead in the underworld. Just as we first saw him at the beginning on top of the wall, here we see him at the end on top of the wall. Only now it's late in the day, isn't it? The sun is setting on his life. He has a gray beard, he's an older man, and Venus is ever present up there. He can't get rid of the bitch. She's always tied with him. And Nanisine with its moon boat there, the crescent moon. Those are the two powers, along with the sun, that resurrected his father Lugalbanda when his brothers put him in that cave. And this is him becoming the judge of the dead in the underworld, which is a Sumerian story. And it's not in the epic, but it's a Sumerian story. And it pretty much presupposes that everyone knew what the whole purpose of the story was, that it was explaining how he became the judge of the dead in the underworld, and did indeed become immortal, actually, as we all are. Our souls leave our bodies, and they are immortal. The body is mortal, not the soul. And this is him sort of in the role of Osiris. He's taken over the throne of Ereshkigal in the underworld, Lord of the Dead. It's a little like the author, whoever he was, Shawshank or whatever his name was. Sort of like Homer doesn't tell you how Achilles dies. He knows you know how Achilles dies. He doesn't bother putting it in. It's an assumption. Again, scholars are not very bright about these things. Okay, that's as far as I've gotten. It's pretty much done. Just have to do some adjusting of the page numbers and table of contents and all that kind of thing. So this is available. It will be available probably in 3 or 4 days for purchase on Amazon, probably for something like $60. Color is expensive to print, but it will be worth it, and it will be in hardcover. I'm putting out all these books in hardcover for my press, Iconic Books, and I believe this is the 6th or 7th book. I forget. It's probably the 6th book so far. And the next one I'll be republishing is an upgraded deluxe version of my autobiography with full color images all the way through it. Totally different book. Some of the chapters and paragraphs undoubtedly I'll end up rewriting there as well, making improvements. So keep in mind, I still do astrology readings. You can hit me up for that if you're interested. I'm available at johndavidebert@gmail.com. I also do private tutoring of students. We're about to begin a class on Isaac Asimov's Foundation novels, which we're going to read through, and we're going to think about it in relation to cosmic cycles, such as Spengler's and Toynbee's and traditional cosmic cycles and so forth. Okay, that's it.